And just taking a look at Bayern Munich when it comes to the DFB-Pokal Cup and in recent seasons. The last time they did win it was in the 1920 season, and that was against Bayer Leverkusen. Since then, though, you can see it's not been good for them. Knocked out in the second round for the following two seasons against Holstein Kiel and Borussia Mönchengladbach. They got to the quarterfinals where Freiburg knocked them out in 22-23 season. Second round against lowly Saarbrücken last season, well, 2 seasons back now. No, last season. And then round of 16
You're
this
right,
season,
Kay.
obviously. I am all right. My apologies. Of course, this season they are now knocked out in the round of 16. And that's not as embarrassing, the fact that it's against Bayer Leverkusen. But still, Ali was not too impressed with what he saw by Bayer Leverkusen, even though they won this game today. Nedum and Neuer now joining us. Luis Garcia still with us. Nedum, Bayern out for another year at an early stage here.
Yeah, it's going to be hugely disappointing for them. But I think, as Ali was saying during the show, I think you expected a bit more from Leverkusen. As soon as it went down to 10, after that collision with Manuel Neuer, the type of collision you tend to see on Red Zone on a Sunday evening, I thought they were going to find their groove. I thought they were going to try and dominate the game a bit more. But in fairness, Bayern were very much there. I think as the game was progressing, it felt like Bayern were running out of ideas. And I suppose there is huge disappointment, not just to lose to them, but to lose at home. I think Company and the players, they would have wanted to do well in this cup, to go toe-to-toe with Leverkusen again and almost leave a mark. But I think, as Xabi Alonso said, Bayern have been rolling teams over this season. And essentially, if you want to beat them, you've got to be effective. And in the end, that's what there was. And, to talk about Ali's point as well about that cross and the header from Teller, I think Kim's obviously been pulled onto the shoulder of, but Alphonso Davies, he's outside of the post. He's outside of the back post as the cross comes into the box. You as a fullback, you have to support your central defender there.
Most of the game, we saw Bayern Munich dominating the game, even creating options. Maybe not that clear as we were expecting, but I thought that at some point they could have an opportunity to score that goal. Even in the last minute, we saw that opportunity to get the equalizer. But it was the patience and the composure of Leverkusen once again. Xavi knowing that in the end they will manage to get that result.
Go ahead.
What I would say is that the challenge for Neuer was unnecessary to begin with. Leimer was there, and if you read the flight of the ball, you know that Frimpong's struggling to bring it down, which then allows Upamecano to get into the picture as well. So there's no need for Manuel Neuer to come out. Now, as players get older, right, not only do you get slow or slower physically, now you can't quite read it as well as you used to. Not because you've lost your ability to read the game, but because you are thinking, 10 years ago, I would get to this ball. 10 years ago, I read it and I get there. Well, it's not 10 years ago. And so Manuel Neuer, at this point in his career, can't be taking these chances, especially when you have defenders. Let them do their job. That's Nedum. Let them do their job. They're right there to defend. Let them be the ones that resolve the problem for you. At this point, it would have been Manuel Neuer would have been far better off to be far more conservative and allow his players to do the job that they're paid to do.
Yes, there has been a narrative in some parts of the German media this season, Nedum, that Bayern need to show that they can beat the big teams. Obviously, then you're looking at the Champions League, because what we have seen is now they've lost to Leverkusen here today. They drew with them even though they were better against them in the Bundesliga already. You saw the Klassiker at the weekend. They lost to Barcelona, of course, in the Champions League. They lost to Aston Villa. I wouldn't put them in the big team category, but you're seeing them coming up against opposition they wouldn't usually. Can this team win the Champions League?
Well, I think you've got to say that, yes, they can, but obviously they have some flaws which could really affect them when it comes down to the knockout rounds. I think seeing the way that they sort of try and defend so aggressively, well, what does that look like when they play against the likes of, say, a Liverpool, for example, who are having a tremendous season? But I think in the end, you realise it's still early in the season for them with their new manager. And as a consequence, I think they'll make tweaks as the season goes on. I think the standard that they are held to in Germany is rightly very different to others. I think that question about can you beat these big teams, can you sort of find a way to win this and be successful? Yes, that is valid, but I think they'll be judged ultimately by how they finish the season with how many trophies that they've had. Obviously, going out today is a huge blow for them. But I think, again, against Leverkusen in the 2 games we've seen, I think Bayern have looked the better side, so I expect them in some ways to be able to carry on that form. We've seen a very stuttering type Leverkusen this season so far, but Bayern domestically, in terms of, say, where they are in Bundesliga, they do look a class apart, in my opinion. And I think, as Ali was saying, you watch the game today, and even though Leverkusen stuck their way through, which is the most important thing, you don't believe that Leverkusen are going to end up having a better season in the league than Bayern Munich will. And then when the Champions League comes, I think there are lots of question marks about some of the bigger teams at the moment. You've got Bayern, you've got Manchester City, you've got Real Madrid at the moment, who aren't exactly as high up as we thought they would be. But I reckon for most of these teams, these next 3 games in the Champions League, they'll find their groove, and before you know it, they'll be in the knockout rounds again, like we've always seen. And before you know it, as I say, you've got some of the biggest teams in Europe ready to go at it to try and win the tournament they believe they should.
Now, that story obviously came before the PSG game, which they did win. But what are your thoughts on the Champions League chances?
I don't think there's any reason to be discouraged by Bayern Munich because they were eliminated today. I think there were extenuating circumstances, and Manuel Neuer will be the first one to tell you that it's on him, that he made a mistake, and that he put his team in a really tough situation. But having said that, I can comfortably make the argument that for long periods of time in this game, even being a man down, they outplayed Bayer Leverkusen. So today is not the reason to be discouraged about Bayern Munich. In fact, I would go the opposite. I would say they should be encouraged that even playing a man down against who is supposed to be their biggest opposition in Bundesliga, they dominated the game. They dominated possession. They created some chances. In the end, they ran out of legs, and eventually they got punished for that man disadvantage. But I don't see today as an issue for Bayern Munich going forward. Now, in terms of what happens in Champions League and the issues that they have had in Champions League against Barcelona, for example, those are things that need to be addressed. I still think Bayern Munich can get better, will get better, and will be there in the end.
Yes, well, we'll see how it all plays out this season, but the Cup definitely delivered in some of the drama today. In Germany, we saw some Cup sets in this game. Arminia Bielefeld in the 3rd tier beating Freiburg.
Oh.
Yes, Stuttgart got the win, though. Werder Bremen at the death against Darmstadt. They will be progressing, and more games will be coming up on Wednesday. The showstopper there will be Leipzig, who aren't in the best form this season, against Eintracht Frankfurt, who are surprising many this season. That's the standout fixture from tomorrow's games.